royal scandal that history tried to bury a boy turned into a bride. Nero was obsessed. He made her empress, lavished her in jewels and rage. When she dared argue while pregnant, Nero, in a blinding fury, struck her fatally. Rome whispered. Nero wailed. But his grief wasn't normal. It was deranged. He didn't just miss Poppaea. He wanted her back, not in memory, in flesh. That's when he found Sporus, a boy who resembled Poppaea. What came next wasn't just a scandal. It was one of history's darkest love stories, twisted, tragic, and buried beneath centuries of silence. And this is where it begins. Sporus was just a child, delicate features, wide, unsure eyes, and an eerie resemblance to Nero's late wife, Poppaea. In another life, he might have lived quietly, unknown to history. But Nero saw something else, not a boy, a replacement. The emperor's obsession grew grotesque. He ordered Sporus castrated, ripping away his innocence, his identity, and his future. Rome held its breath. No one dared defy him, not the Senate, not the priests, not even the gods, it seemed. Sporus was dressed in silks, veiled like a bride, paraded before the people as Nero's new empress. They married in a lavish public ceremony. Nero placed a ring on Sporus's finger and whispered Poppaea's name. It wasn't love. It was madness draped in royal robes, a child torn from himself, forced to wear the skin of a dead woman. And while Rome watched in stunned silence, a royal scandal was immortalized in shadows. Inside Nero's palace, Sporus was a ghost wrapped in silk. He walked the marble halls with eyes lowered, dressed in the fashion of an empress, spoken to with titles meant for a queen. Yet inside, he was a boy, barely grown, forever changed. He dined beside Rome's most feared man, smiled when summoned, danced when commanded. Every glance from Nero was a test, every silence, a threat. Sporus had no voice in this twisted love story. He was not a lover, not a partner. He was a puppet, played to soothe the emperor's delusions. And the court watched. Some whispered, some mocked, others wept in private. But no one stopped it, because to defy Nero was death. In the mirrors of the palace, Sporus saw a stranger in bridal lace, but behind the painted face was a soul screaming for escape, while Rome bowed to the show. Rome was captivated. The streets buzzed not just with politics and power, but with whispers of Nero's Empress. Citizens joked, playwrights hinted in satirical lines, and the aristocracy played along, pretending not to notice the horror veiled in gold. Sporus was paraded like a royal trophy, adorned in jewels, his hand held tightly by the emperor during public ceremonies. Nero didn't just demand obedience, he demanded performance. Sporus smiled under painted lips, curtsied on cue, and walked the path carved by madness. But inside, he was breaking. Each step in silk heels crushed the boy he once was. Each dinner with senators who pretended not to notice deepened the lie. He lived in a golden cage, its bars built from fear, its walls painted with the illusion of favor. And still, no one dared to speak, because in Nero's Rome, silence was survival, and Sporus had become the silence. Behind Nero's twisted affection for Sporus lurked a haunting shadow, Poppaea Sabina, his dead wife. Nero didn't just want companionship, he wanted resurrection. Poppaea had been the empress of his obsession, beautiful, cunning, and commanding. But in a violent rage, Nero had kicked her during pregnancy, ending both her life and their unborn child. Guilt didn't consume him, it distorted him. When Nero saw Sporus, delicate and soft-featured, something in him snapped. He wasn't seeing a boy, he was seeing Poppaea reborn. That's why he had Sporus castrated, to preserve the illusion, to mold him perfectly into the wife he destroyed. He forced the boy into Poppaea's clothes, called him by her name in private, and made Rome play along with the charade. This wasn't love, it was grief weaponized. And Sporus, he wasn't replacing a queen. He was living as a ghost, haunted by a woman he never knew. It wasn't just whispers behind palace doors. Nero made it official. In a spectacle that mocked Roman tradition, the emperor married Sporus in a public ceremony. Senators and nobles were forced to attend. The boy wore a bridal veil adorned in royal silk. Nero, the groom, Sporus, the bride. Incense filled the air. Harps echoed through marble halls. But beneath the glamour was horror. A child dressed in a dead woman's image, walking into a role he never chose. From that day on, Sporus was no longer himself. He became Poppeia's ghost. Nero paraded him through Rome, not as a consort, but as a symbol of his grief twisted into obsession. Wherever Nero went, Sporus followed, forced to mimic the late Empress's voice, her grace, her smile. He wasn't a person anymore. He was a performance. At royal banquets, Sporus sat by Nero's side like a porcelain doll. In public, he was praised. In private, he endured mockery, isolation, and silent tears. The court smiled, but behind closed doors, whispers grew. Is this love or lunacy? And yet, Sporus adapted. He had to. In a palace where disobedience meant death, pretending was survival. He lived in constant fear, cloaked in silks that felt like chains. He wasn't Nero's lover. He was a living shrine to a dead woman, trapped in a role he never auditioned for. Rome was crumbling, not with a roar, but with a whimper masked by Nero's laughter. The once glorious emperor now stumbled through the palace halls, drunk on delusion and paranoia. He sang to himself, performed on makeshift stages, demanded ovations from terrified slaves. The Senate plotted. In June of 68 AD, the Senate declared him an enemy of Rome. As soldiers closed in, Nero fled, disguised, desperate, and delusional. With no one left to sing his praises, he took his own life. And what of Sporus? He was handed from one powerful Roman to another, paraded like a cursed jewel, forever trapped in a role he never chose. When his final captor planned to showcase him in a brutal public spectacle mocking his marriage to Nero, Sporus chose death over humiliation. He ended his life before the show began. Echoes of the past are never silenced again.